Your user is on the same SERP, but they can only click once. That's how Luigi Ferguson thinks about search. It's not paid versus organic. It's one battlefield, one decision, one click. Luigi leads holistic search strategy at Intuit for the QuickBooks brand. And in this episode, he unpacks what it really means to align SEO and SEM, especially as the platforms themselves become more opaque and more automated. We talk about the rise of AI-powered ad tools, the politics of attribution, and why the real challenge isn't just clicks, it's control. Luigi also breaks down how to plan content for AI overviews, defend your brand and search results, and rethink ROI in a world where impressions go up, but clicks go missing. And Luigi doesn't just talk theory. He's done this work at McAfee, Yahoo, Criteo, and now Intuit. He's seen how teams win when they integrate and how they lose when they don't. The takeaway, if you're paid and the organic teams aren't in the same room, you're probably losing clicks and customers. Let's get into it. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Page 2 podcast. I'm your host, John Clark, and as always, joined by my partner in crime at Moving Traffic Media, Joe DeVita. Today, we're welcoming Luigi Ferguson to the show. Welcome. So before we dive in, lots of fun stuff to talk about, but I think just to maybe set the stage of your current role, right, at Intuit, huge company, lots of different brands, help us understand where you fit into that big ecosystem of products and brands.
Yeah, absolutely. Within Intuit, I work on the QuickBooks brand, which specializes and really focuses on helping small and medium-sized businesses get the tools that they need to run their business better and grow. And within the QuickBooks organization, I work in holistic search. So what I do every single day is understand what's going on across search engines, mostly on the organic side, but also try to make sure I understand what's going on the paid side. And not just Google and the places that you would traditionally think of. It's also the new places too, where the places where we're not, but we know our users are, potential customers are having conversations. How do we get there and make sure that we're present and can engage with them too?
Love that. Lots of interesting paths that go down there. But I think before we dive into the fun conversations, I think you and I just crossed paths at Razorfish. I started in 2010, and I think you might have left around 2010. Is that accurate? And then I think you and Joe know each other from even before, right?
Yes, Joe and I, we definitely I know Joe started before me on the digital marketing side, but we ended up crossing paths at a small e-commerce company based in New York called Search Technologies way back when. And then, ended up joining Razorfish right after that. And the timing, it sounds about right. There are so many people that have come through that great agency, so I'm not surprised.
Absolutely. It's a rich... Go ahead, Joe.
I just got stung by a bee. I'm sitting outside today, but I'll roll through it. I'll share a quick story. Luigi and I met 20 years ago. We worked at this e-commerce startup, as you mentioned. 2005, we met. We started working together, and it was a great way to learn e-commerce at a very large level. There was 1 million SKUs. It was a well-run organization. Eventually, it sold to Best Buy. Luigi and I did not become millionaires from that acquisition, but we both, I think, learned a lot. We both learned a lot, right? It was a smart group of people. And so I started in 2005, and I had 18 months of e-commerce experience. I was still very green in my career, and Luigi was responsible for managing the Google Ads program, and I got brought in to do some smaller stuff like affiliate, and maybe you guys remember the Yahoo Search Submit Pro. That was like one of the products. So we won't, we had a great boss at the time, and he gave Luigi and I a lot of great responsibility, and he tasked me with trying to grow this Search Submit Pro business. And at some point, I was spending double the money that I was in a certain amount of time. If we want to invest more, I need an analysis. I got to bring it to our CFO. I was like, yeah, okay, I can do this analysis for you. So I get out my notebook, and I'm like, okay, clicks, I write it down. Spend, I write it down. Number of links, blah, blah, blah. I write it all down. I'm calculating percent change. Okay, this divided by this times 100. I've got this whole thing, 3 pages of notes, and our boss comes over and he's like, how you doing with that analysis? I go, it's right here. Here you go. I rip the thing out and I hand him my paper. I can't walk into the CFO's office with your notebook. You have to put this in Excel. And I was like, okay. I had very little experience with Excel. So he's, Luigi, can you show Joe how we conduct an analysis here? And Luigi had to teach me. He taught me a lot of things about Excel, taught me the percent change formula, the VLOOKUP, the HLOOKUP, custom fields and pivot tables, things that I have gone on to teach countless search professionals to. But Luigi taught all that stuff to me 20 years ago.
It's crazy. Like this industry, there's so many tools, but there is really nothing like Excel.
Yeah, if it has to be quick and dirty, nothing is going to get to the answer, unfortunately, right? Because there's a lot that comes with that. But sometimes it's just, let's just use what we know and let's get in, get out, and get our day going. Absolutely.
Definitely. I'd love to dive into holistic search. My background started on the paid side. And when I got hired at Razorfish, it was actually the first SEO official title I'd ever had. I'd been in paid search up until then. And they had a lot of clients who were trying to figure out that holistic search ecosystem. And so I think I was a good fit because I had a little bit of SEO background, but was deep on the paid side. So maybe to start, a lot of times those two departments don't play nice together, or they're completely separate. They don't share a lot of data. In some cases, they're managed by different agencies. In your experience, are there any tips or maybe foundational principles that you would apply to situations like that, just to try to start to bring that together a little bit?
Yeah, I really believe, to your point, it's about removing those silos and being very intentional about it from the outset, realizing that a user is on the same SERP and they can only click in one place. So the closer that you are, the more that the agencies are talking. If they're separated, the more data that's being shared, both proactively, but also when tests are being done, like looking at the holistic picture, right? Because you might have grown paid clicks by 20%, but what happened to organic, right? If you're able to drive your organic click-through rate by 15%, is it a landing page that now paid search can use? Are you using title tags and meta descriptions that maybe can be woven into RSAs, right? It's really about making sure that all of it is looked at from the same lens. And I feel like Google wants that, because if you think about where it's going with AI Max, right? It's almost like this very different version of, oh my gosh, I forget the name of it, but it's looking at your website. You don't even need keywords. It's looking at the pages that you've built. It's coming up with dynamic search tags. That's what I'm thinking of. It's creating the experience for you. So if you have a strong organic presence, you have a lot of technical foundations done correctly, your content has been created with the right audience in mind. Now you can do these things like AI Max. You can do these things like Broad Match. You can now participate in these AI mode ads when they become available, because you created those foundations and you've made sure that you're strong on one side, which enables you to lean into innovation on the other side.
Yeah, I love that comment about your user is on the same SERP, but why compete against yourselves in more ways than one? So you have experience across both B2C and B2B, so it's obviously B2B today. But when you think about holistic search, are there nuances between the two, or do a lot of those same principles still apply regardless of who you're going after?
Yeah, it's interesting because on the B2C side, that sale is happening a lot faster, right? So there are just fewer touch points when you're trying to understand what that conversion path looks like. And on the B2B side, there's a lot more involved, right? They might be looking at a blog post, and then they go and look at maybe one of your product pages. And then maybe they go to the pricing page, but then they need a different blog post, right? So because of that whole idea of understanding that path to purchase ends up becoming a lot more important, just because there are so many areas that are leaning in and providing an assist, right? And that's just the things that you can track. You know, we're not talking about people asking for recommendations in back channels, or people going and asking their favorite large language model about who they recommend. So it's really important. I would say it's more so important that rigor, that governance, that cooperation exists holistically on the B2B side. One, because you're probably also spending a lot to drive that conversion, right? So any place along the way where you can allow organic to own the conversation and to guide the user down instead of having to pay for that engagement, it's even better, especially when you think about the top of the funnel, right? Some of these top of the funnel searches, AIOs are dominating, and they're impacting both paid and organic click-through rates. So you want to make sure that you're getting into the AIO if possible, so that way you can be part of the consideration set, because at the bottom of the funnel, you may not even be thought of, right? So it's very important that cooperation exists, so that way from the beginning of who do I consider, who's everybody else talking about, you're there, to the middle about, okay, how do I compare features, so that way when somebody's saying whatever brand they're filling in, that it's your brand, right? hopefully you're not paying the 87, 56, whatever it is, dollars per click at the top of the funnel, and you're letting organic own most of that. But you really, again, you want more of the interplay on the B2C side. There's a lot of that too, but just not to the same extent, right? Because you're probably battling more affiliates to drive that conversion. You're probably battling more people that are doing like comparisons, like the ZDNets, Tom's Hardware, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you had a really interesting post on LinkedIn about this media halo effect, right? Where every impression has some sort of value to the end conversion. And you talked a lot about, right, the different steps in the funnel and how do you, right, if you were building a strategy for SEO to really own that top of funnel and save some of those high click costs, how do you take that to a CEO and try to sell that in as it relates to attributing that ROI that is, I'll call it non-traditional, right? Because it's not directly attributed to the final click, if that makes sense. But have you had conversations around that?
Oh, it's one of those things that you do it and you think that you have it down, and then you're reminded every conversation is a brand new one. And I think to your point, it's all about the numbers because you know how much this click costs. You know what the CPA is. So it's about how do we get more at bats by leveraging organic. Let's say there are 1 million searches for this one keyword, but to be top of the page and paid, it's going to cost you $50 on average, right? Thankfully, there's a lot of technologies like value-based bidding and other things that'll make sure that you're not wasting too much. But the reality is that $50 is an expensive click. So if you can show a plan where you have that right to win, you have a content strategy that'll help you get there, you have a linking strategy, internal, external, that's really what you bring. You say, hey, here's the opportunity in terms of the addressable market. Here's the audience that we're going after. Here's our share in paid, but also here's our investment in paid. Here's what we think it's going to take in order to get there on the organic side. And this is what that math looks like. So it's true. Months 1 through 3, you may still have a lot of that spend still going on the paid side, but hopefully over time, hopefully months 2 and 3, you're beginning to see some of that fruit start to bear. And then ongoing, you're there. And of course, there's maintenance involved, but it's that 1 + 1 = 3. And people always wonder, what do you mean? And that's the whole idea, right? If you're paying out of your pocket, you still need to pay for SEO, but it's that sustain. Your budget has exhausted on the paid side, but because you did the work, you're still getting that organic goodness. And you're going to keep doing it as long as you're doing all the right things. And that's the part you're trying to quantify. So when you do that, you look at, okay, what does 12 to 18 months look like? And how do you show that drawdown on the paid side because you're able to compensate it? Or you just say, hey, I want all of it. And now you know, here's the extra that we could potentially get because you know what the conversion rate looks like on the organic side. You put it together, everybody. That helps the view of the investment versus here's what we can get with paid, and that's all we're going to get.
That 1 plus, I was just going to say,
You and I were probably going to say the same thing, Joe.
1 + 1 = 3. We used to describe that as multiplicative, right? And a lot of times we use that word to talk about brand search. I don't know if you guys remember this, but sometimes you had to justify a little spend for brand search. And can you talk us through maybe your evolution in feeling about brands paying for their brand?
Yeah, I think in this world where match types are not what they used to be, where search engines are absolutely trying to bring as many advertisers into auctions as possible for their own monetization, you end up seeing lots of blurred lines. So in a perfect world, nobody else is bidding on your brand term. You're getting all that goodness. But the reality is that if you have a product that really doesn't have a lot of high consideration, right? You could, like the Coke or Pepsi, right? Nike, Adidas. It's just something where I just need this thing. I don't care where it comes from as long as I get this thing. And somebody is doing that search. If you're not protecting it, now you open the door for somebody else that wasn't planning on considering one of your competitors to do. So what is that worth to you? Because if your competitor has a compelling offer, like 80% off or flash sale, you likely can't compete with that, right? But here they are showing to your potential customers and taking them away. So you see that direct impact to your click-through rate, That's going to impact your clicks, which is going to translate into fewer sales. So it's taking food out of your mouth by them being there. So it's turned into one of these costs of doing business. The reality is that there is software out there that is monitoring SERPs. So that way, if you're showing high in the organic, which you should, if it's a brand search, and there are no competitors, it'll actually pull your bid down or actually pause it completely. Those incrementality conversations still happen because if you can save $1, let's save it. But also the reality is that saving that dollar might come at the expense of $5 or $10 or $100 because by being absent, you've now opened the door for one of your competitors to steal that click, steal that consideration, and turn somebody that wasn't even thinking about that brand into one of their customers.
Yeah, I think that's always not always, but oftentimes the untalked about component of pulling brand search out as you open up that space a little bit. Yeah, it's always a tough conversation. I'm curious, you talked a lot about AI Max and sort of automations and things like that. Having been in this industry for as long as you have, I'm sure you're familiar with the old school levers that we used to have to pull for paid search. Oh yeah. The penny under the max bid. That was a fun one. So I'm curious how you're thinking about all this automation and sort of the, taking away of those controls that we've become so accustomed to and using, and maybe how you foresee them affecting performance where a lot of that brand control and the old school levers are being removed.
Yeah. Automation is amazing, right? Because it saves you time that you feel that you want to invest, but you don't have to. The cost is control and sometimes transparency in the data. And that's what we've been seeing over time, right? We're getting all this innovation, but in order to do, that's the trade-off. We can't show you every single search that your ad was triggered for. We can't show you the data for every single headline in your RSAs. We can't show you every single URL where your ad showed up. There's just so much data. We're talking about petabytes upon exabytes that it's just not easy for anybody to administer, especially when you have as many advertisers as Microsoft or Google have. So you have to decide, where are you willing to relinquish that control and where is it vital to your business, right? So if brand safety is very important to you, there's a good chance that there are things that you might not do because you don't need exclusions. You need to say, I only want ads that are going to run in these places, for example. And a lot of times when people say, do I opt into the search network or the search partners, or do I stay away? That's usually the biggest trade-off, right? Yeah, you're in there, but what's exactly in there? You can block things, but I don't want to show up there and somebody sending me a screenshot. So the innovation and the automation is great, but that's ultimately what you're deciding on. As we're getting further and further away from that search term and that keyword, we all have to be okay with that. But if you're a small advertiser and you don't have the people or the budget to be able to be in there hour by hour pulling the levers, then it's amazing because you don't have to pay an agency to do it for you. You don't have to pay a person to sit there. You're happy about the black box. Like you hope that it gets new features so that way you can get even more efficiency out of it. But if you're a larger enterprise where this data has more value than just what you're seeing because it fuels what's happening across other teams, you have a creative team, you have a landing page team, there's a team that's doing the optimization, there's a team that's coming up with the strategy. The further you get away from the data, the more complex that becomes. So you end up trying to use your own first party data based on what happens after the click to try to understand what's going on before the click. And then it's really based on your ability to bring the data in and to be able to analyze it, right? Because the in-platform data is always going to be the most optimistic viewpoint. But what does that mean when it actually gets to your bottom line, right? Because people may have canceled, people may have returned things, people may churn. None of that is showing up in your Google Ads reporting, right? None of it is showing up in your Microsoft Ads reporting. So you have to bake that in. So that's the trade-off. And that's what we're seeing now, where the ability to append data, the ability to update data after the fact becomes a lot more vital. But if you can't do that, then you really just have to hope and trust that what you're seeing is directionally true. Because if not, it's so hard to reverse engineer and try to get to the bottom of what's going wrong. Before, when you could see everything, was a lot easier. And that's really where we've gone to, where we have to trust a platform that we don't necessarily know how everything's working, but the numbers look good. So let's be positive, right? And when somebody asks, how do we get more? The answer isn't optimization as much as it is investing. And that's a difficult conversation.
Definitely. It's also important for that whole idea of holistic search, because when you have different teams mostly optimizing out of individual UIs, Facebook, Google Ads, Microsoft, all of those conversion events are fighting for the same conversion, and they'll often overly attribute what came from their platform versus another. You mentioned the challenge of advertising when maybe a competitor is running a flash sale or something like that. We work a lot with e-commerce clients where basically the version of that is Amazon, right? Like free shipping, you can get it in 2 days. Oftentimes you'll have affiliates pushing product through Amazon at, let's call it $5 cheaper than what you could get on the official store. I don't know if that necessarily exists. That same sort of like issue exists for your current role. It's probably more traditional affiliate where maybe you have a NerdWallet buying ads or something like that. But are there any tactics that you found are helpful in competing those instances?
Yeah. A lot of times you're opening the door and welcoming the fox into the hen house, right? You're creating this competition. The first thing is really just like good, thorough documentation about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And then also the administration. So that way, if people are caught, that it's not just a meaningless notice. You can actually like claw back revenue, because that's what affiliates understand, right? If they see that whatever it is, whether it's the traffic sources that they're using that may or may not be the best, or it's trying to undercut you and take conversions away, I found that's the most effective because people respect it. Everybody's just trying to get it. If I was able to blur the lines and get away with it, fair. But if you hold me accountable, I'll respect it, or they won't be a partner anymore. And either way, that may not always be the worst if you're running into these quality concerns. And then otherwise, there's a lot on the reporting to be able to catch offenders. There are some things that you can do from a targeting standpoint, just so that way you're really going after prospects versus a person that has been to your website, might even be a customer, and they're just looking for a way to save, whether it's cash back or something else before they buy, and basically treat those people differently in terms of how you bid for them, potentially what that landing page experience is. And you're almost creating an experience on page that they can't replicate because it's something that you only get because I know that you're not somebody that's visited in the last 7 days. You're not somebody that's purchased in the last 30 days. Yeah. I want to earn your business more so than the person that always buys from me and they always have a coupon code. They're always using cashback. So that also ends up being very effective. Understanding your audiences, being able to segment them in a way that allows you to message them differently, but also bid on them differently. And then if there is one last thing from like a merchandising standpoint, the reality is that you're the brand, right? So whether it's Amazon or whether it's the SERP, you can likely create different packages, different add-ons that an affiliate isn't necessarily aware of. They might still drive that traffic, but at least you're able to get more of that transaction. So instead of it being, people who are looking for only at $50 to get the $15 off, they now become a higher basket, which doesn't fix the affiliate problem, but it allows you to get more margin out of it, because when you're paying out that commission, that's what you're really eating out. You're eating from the profit associated with the product. It's a combination of those things. It really depends on the category and how fierce the competition is and where it's coming from, whether it's from affiliates or partners, or it's from other brands, and then testing to see which one ultimately drives the best performance.
Luigi, I just want to ask you to give us a little bit more on like fraud detection and optimizing against fraud. And with some context for the company or for our agency, we see it mostly with lead gen, not so much e-commerce. Like we spend a lot of time trying to understand the quality of leads. And when we test new things, oftentimes we see a surge in performance because of some fraud that we didn't anticipate. There's a lot of lead gen products out there that autofill forms for people to make it easier for them to convert. But often we see that's where most of the fraud comes from. When we started to explore with Performance Max with Google, we launched that product and found a lot of fraud in the conversions that we were generating. I worry now with AI Max, we're going to have to go through those same steps to try to learn how to get rid of fraud. I wonder, have you seen that a lot in your career? Have you taken any steps to identify it and optimize away from it? Anything you could share?
Yeah. So I think what we're talking about is basically the difference between your CPL and your CPQL, right? So your cost per lead and your cost per qualified lead. And that ultimately becomes a differentiator. I remember working with some financial, like clients in the financial services space before, and that was basically how they did it. But they did it to the point where it was all the way to funding, right? So they wanted to know what's the actual ROI on this keyword. And what they would do is they would append all that data, right? And they would say, okay, let's say that you drove 100 leads, right? We know the pages, we know the ad groups, the campaigns, we know the keywords, the IDs associated with all these things. So all that is being populated into their system. It's attached to the lead. So that way, when they try to now qualify the lead, whether it's somebody reaching out or emailing, and they realize, okay, this might have been a marketing qualified lead, but it's not a sales qualified lead. That's where we kick it out, right? So we're optimizing towards the sale qualified lead, even though in our platforms, we're only capturing the MQLs. And that's how you do it, right? Is you're hopefully using a system that's capturing all this data, that is stitching it all together. So that way, after the fact, whatever your sales cycle is, whether it's 30 days or 45 days, you're always going back. And is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but you need something. And that's the way that you do it. The reality is that there's also this idea that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So if you know that your CPL all in is usually like $25, but somebody is coming in and all of a sudden you're seeing 3 times the typical lead volume and the leads are only 50 cents. Hold on a second now. We've all been doing this long enough to know that there is no such thing as a good 50-cent lead. If there was, then we'd all be going after that. So you almost say it's like the human version of anomaly detection, right? This thing looks different, so I'm not going to trust it until I know and I can verify that I can trust it, right? And there may not always be ways that you can limit the investment there, but almost to the point where maybe you pause it until you let that data pass back happen. And you can see, we let it run for 2 weeks. Let's pause it for 2 weeks and see what ends up happening, right? Or whatever the case is for you to feel comfortable, because what you're trying to do is to vet the inventory source and vet the way that it's being put in there, because that's the only way. Because whatever that activity is probably being done the same way for every single advertiser. They're likely not going to now move to someplace else because they realize they're not driving any more leads for you, right? Whatever they do, it's just, you just happen to be caught in it at that particular moment. So if you're able to basically test it, pause it, and then see if there's any data to validate the value. Now, and again, it sucks, but when the budgets get high enough, you need that rigor, because if you're scaling it, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you want to make sure that there isn't a lot of waste in there. And it's better to say, we have this 12-week process or whatever it is. So that way we can validate every source of investment across the portfolio. And it's better for you and it's better for us. Like, everybody that does lead gen understands risk mitigation, right? So hopefully that's not a brain conversation for them.
Yeah, that was a very practical answer, Luigi. I was hoping that with Intuit's massive budget, they would allow you to send a SWAT team into Eastern European bot farms, but I guess we'll just keep following the same practical advice. Get smarter about conversion feedback loops.
It's amazing in the sense that whether you're like in Expedia or like AT&T, who's spending over $1 billion in media, or you're just like Adam's Dry Cleaners, right, who might only have a few $1,000s a year, it's the same issue, because it's the platforms, right? It's the platforms, and we're all using the same inventory. So unfortunately, we all get exposed to it. The question is, how soon do we catch it, and how much does it impact us if we leave it unchecked? Having a strong legal team, it does help, because you can send letters and they'll scare people, but you try to make sure you save that for the most kind of egregious circumstances. Otherwise, try to let the tech and your analytics lead the way.
Having a strong legal team definitely helps when it comes to monitoring brand, especially when folks are buying terms and things like that. If you have the brand trademark, obviously that helps in Google. Are there any other, I don't know, ways that you've found success in trying to mitigate folks who would be trying to buy brand terms or using trademarks improperly?
There's a lot of software out there that does that monitoring for you and will actually auto flag it. So that way you let them know who has the green light to show and who's not on that whitelist. And because they're looking, I believe you can have it go as often as every 1 hour or maybe every 2 hours, but whatever the frequency is, it's always looking. And instead of you having to now right click the URL in the ad and send it to an email address, all that's happening on your behalf. So I found that ends up being the most effective. Sometimes it can be a little too aggressive and you end up declining or preventing actual partners that you want to show up there because you might have a limited time promotion, a co-marketing event where, you want these people to show. So just making sure that those lines of communications are open so that way you can flag those things before they happen. That's the only thing that I've seen, but otherwise that's the best way to do it, right? You don't want to have to be refreshing a SERP every single hour of the day. If you can find a tool that can do it for you, then it just makes your life that much easier.
I remember at Razorfish, there were some of the coordinators, like that would be part of their role. It was like every couple hours you go in, you take a screenshot. Yeah, it's just brutal. I was curious how you have used shopping feeds in a way that sort of brings in SEO insights in order to optimize the shopping feed for paid search. I think you mentioned something about that earlier on in the ideas being more holistic. For example, we have a client who uses like really rich brand specific tone, which doesn't always align well with how consumers search in terms of the keywords and the product names that are being used. How are you guys, or how have you thought about leveraging those two things in the past?
Shopping is a great channel because the conversion rate is typically so high right there. They see something, they buy something. It's so much different. I would say the two things that I've seen from a data standpoint, from an opportunity standpoint, one is what else you include on that page, right? So again, if you have the main product, are you doing it kind of in Amazon style where you're offering other products, right? Because it'll help you understand what other things people are interested in that are expressing interest in this product, which might have some usefulness in other channels, whether it's directly on the website or if you want to use a similar experience on paid social or things like that. Also, you're talking about brands with standards, and the crazy part is that you almost want to be able to demonstrate how that's hurting more than helping, to the point where I remember 10 or so years ago, there was like this big push around normalizing what's in your feed to what users are saying, right? So if you're saying that your dress is plum, it's not plum, it's purple. Nobody is searching plum, but lots of people are searching purple. The shoes, it's not an elevated heel, it's a pump or whatever it is, right? Because shopping is one of the most democratic ways of meeting a customer where they are, right? You can translate what you sell and what they're searching for, but you have to take the initiative to do. And I understand, right? Because if you're like Hermes or something like that, where you're not for everybody, I don't know why you're running shopping ads, but if it's something like that, then I could understand why your brand standards are your brand standards. But I would make sure that maybe like in the description, not necessarily the headline, it may be like in the description or like in the attributes in your feed, that you're finding a way to map, because that's really what you want to do. Even in my home life, whenever I need to find something, I find out, okay, what does the industry call it? But then what do regular people call it, right? And maybe I've just been doing marketing too long, but when you're trying to find that thing that's like the thing you're really looking for, that's usually how you do it. So there's a lot of great information, a lot of great insight, only because when you think about your web experience and the facets and the filters on your page, shopping can help you understand a lot of that nuance, because you can see, okay, are people searching by color? Are they searching by size? Are they searching by price? What are those triggers and what are those levers that really help people go from idea to engagement to conversion, right? And of course, it can happen a million different ways, but if you understand those big chunks, now you can play around with where do we put things, right? Because you can only show but so many characters in the headline of the shopping listing. So do we lead with the color? If you have pictures, the color is pretty much a foregone conclusion. So maybe you don't need to lead with that. Maybe you're leading with the thing that people can't see, right? Which might be a detail, whether it's like a pattern or the length or a size, something where you're able to drive better clicks as a result because you provided this extra info, but also you're providing a better experience to the user, right? Because everybody's is doing one thing, but you're doing something different because of your data and your understanding of the data, right? So in those instances, it's better to stand out and be different because hopefully that difference is a way that you're driving better performance.
Yeah, I love that. Talking about shopping and knowing we're quickly approaching Q4, which is crazy. It's been nuts. I wanted to tap your brain on how you've approached tentpole moments. So Black Friday, obviously the holiday shopping season in general, and now in your role at Intuit, there's different tentpole moments, right? Like tax season and stuff like that. How do you think about planning for those sorts of things and assigning budgets and stuff like that? Obviously not getting into specific numbers, but just how do you approach like big moments like that from a holistic planning perspective?
Yeah, I love that question because you want to be thinking about that really as early as you can, right? And the best way I can explain it is almost like a barbell strategy where on one side, you're trying to think, okay, broad strokes, what are we doing differently this year than last year? What did we learn from last year that we can apply into this year, whether it's a creative strategy, a landing page strategy, an investment strategy? Right? Because your customer is always changing, right? Because your customer is responding to external stimuli, whether it's inflation or it's the job market or the stock market. So you have to look into the future a little bit, read the tea leaves and try to understand what could happen. And then you have, in my experience, you usually have a strong plan A, and then you have that plan B that you don't want to use, but in case you need to break the glass, you're not scrambling around. You have it there. You figure for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, probably around June, you were thinking about that, right? Trying to figure out, okay, what are our investment levels? What's the learnings? Let's go back to that wrap up that we did after last year and revisit it. And then you're getting like that skeleton, right? You're beginning to flesh it out based on, has anything changed around your target audience? Are there any new capabilities that you want to test out before? Because that's the thing, right? When you get to that period, there's too many things going on to be able to learn. So you start that planning up front. So that way, if there are things that you want to learn, if there are tests that you want to perform, that you can do it during these slow seasons, because everything is going to intensify exponentially. The visits, the conversions, the mayhem, right? So you really want to get that learning in market as soon as possible. But then from an organic standpoint, you want the upfront time, because there might be content that you want to create because you realize that your content strategy also has evolved, right? We're talking about AI mode, AI overviews. We're talking about getting content that's ready for AI. If you're not thinking about that in 2025, when it comes to Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you're probably leaving some on the table, right? But to produce that content, you likely need to get people onboarded, whether it's freelancers or your internal team. You need to solidify that creative approach. So that's going to take time, but also you want to make sure it starts ranking. So you want to make sure that you leave room for that. So I would say it's early, it's integrated. Hopefully it is forward looking, and considers things that you can't see, but also that you have a way of being able to pivot. And that's the other part of the barbell, right? I'll never forget being in those almost like war rooms where you think you have everything set, and then you find out that a competitor is doing something that you never planned. And now it's 2 days, people have that turkey leg in their mouth at the table. And you're like, okay, over email on your phone, what are we doing? Okay, I have to step away and take a call, but it's the gig, right? And hopefully you plan well enough that you can compensate for 90% of it. And you're only dealing with that 10% that you have to be flexible on. But that's the other part of the barbell, right? What are those things that we're doing in the moment, day of, intraday? Where can we lean in heavier? Where do we want to pull back and ultimately execute? That is what makes those tentpole moments so nerve-wracking, but also so exciting, because as marketers, we get that data instantaneously. That page that you built in August you see how it's playing in November, right? And things that you didn't know. Now you say to yourself, okay, next year, here's how we're doing it differently. You're gathering those insights almost in real time on both sides. And that's the way that you want to approach it, right? Because the way that you do the smaller events, whether it's like the President's Day or 4th of July, is going to be a subset of that, right? So the more you flesh it out, the more diligent you are about capturing what everybody does and timing it out is only going to make it easier to execute and decide, is the investment worth it for, I don't know, Memorial Day, right? That's a very like mattresses, furniture, cars. But if you have a software product, should you? I don't know. But based on all the work that you have to do to spin that up, that'll tell you.
Yeah. I like the comment around like, there's just too much mayhem to be testing in that moment. So are you thinking about those like smaller holidays, President's Day, Memorial Day, as like those are the times to do the testing in anticipation for that big tentpole? Is that sort of one way to think about doing promotions during that time, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And the reality is that because you have so many people in market during a holiday, promotions is something to consider, but you have to almost think, are you getting anything from it? Right. Because if you offer 10 or 20% off, you now have to drive a much higher conversion rate in order to balance that. Right. And of course, from an LTV standpoint, there is some impact to gaining incremental customers, but you have to weigh that against, are we doing a doorbuster when nobody is looking? All right. Because Prime days are a great example. Nobody was thinking about these July, October moments that the Amazon now owns. But now that they own them and people are looking for it and thinking about it, it's a great time to be in market, right? If you sell the kind of things that people are looking for. Before, nobody was thinking about them. Now you other big retailers running other sales in tandem as a result. So the customer leads the way, but I would say the marketplace defines the need, because if nobody else is offering anything, or even if it's just one or two, I don't know if you take the bait, so to speak, right? You can try it during a holiday, and then you can do the finance due diligence and see if we did nothing and we just made more per customer, would it have been worth all of the people, energy and time, all of the reporting, all the everything that we did to spin that up? Or do we just get what we get, right? And I think that's the hard part, right? Sometimes as marketers, we think that we create the markets. We don't. It's very hard to pull people in unprompted. That's the great thing about TV. That's the great thing about big media investments, whether it's like a YouTube on the homepage or buying the Yahoo homepage or something. Yeah. You've now created critical mass, critical awareness. You built the urgency, then people act, right? It's like a Tuesday in May. I'm not excited about anything. I'm just trying to get to the week versus Black Friday, where people have been clipping coupons. They've been checking forums. They have on their headband because they've been sweating, pouring over this stuff. That's the difference, right? So you really want to make sure that based on your product and your category, that you're considering all that.
It really is crazy to think about Prime Day in general. First one, big success. Next year, you had Target and some of these other big retailers having their own day. And now you'll see prominent sellers on Amazon just calling it like, yeah, we're having a Prime Day sale on our own official site in conjunction with everything else. It really has shaped that time period in the summer where historically there hasn't been much. Pretty amazing.
And Amazon has been able to do what nobody else has been able to do because of their reach, right? Everything from the boxes to they can now tell you about it across video, across their music service, across Alexa, across their Audible platform. They can drive a lot of awareness very quickly. So I've seen Black Friday days in July. I've seen Christmas in July. I've seen so many variations where people are trying to pull forward that back to school spending, and it didn't really land. It didn't. And it's not until they do that. And now think about it, right? Amazon knows that November is this peak shopping period. So what are we going to do? We're going to preempt all of it. We're going to steal that share of wallet. And now everybody has to fight for whatever's left. Because if the deals are good enough, if the right vendors and brands have participated, you may have gotten 90% of your shopping list done. So yeah, I might pick up some extra things here and there and see what other people have, but otherwise I'm good, right? So those dynamics have really been changing. And what I see is that there are brands who are working to try to get there too, whether it's like through podcasting or through influencers and try to build up momentum for certain time periods. And it works to varying degrees, but the reality is that just the amount of investment that's needed to create that share of thought, right? There's so many things that we're thinking about. That's ultimately what moves the needle. So if you can coordinate it, you can be very successful. But if you don't have the infrastructure to be able to accommodate it, you have to hope somebody else has the idea and you can ride their coattails.
Yeah, you mentioned content, and you had this really great LinkedIn post around the impact that LLMs are having on Chegg and just the massive disruption in traffic. As you step back and think about just content production in general, how are you thinking about creating content in a way that still results in some sort of KPI, right? Whether you're thinking more about SEO as a brand channel and an impression or an actual click that's getting someone in light of what we're seeing with other brands like Chegg just getting decimated in terms of traffic, AI overviews, all those sorts of things. Like, how are you thinking about creating content, finding topics, maybe even the structure of the content itself and how that plays into discovery?
It's actually crazy you bring that up because I was in a webinar on Friday talking about this exact thing, right? Because it is possible to do AI too much where you've taken the humanity out of your content, but also you're trying to battle how many brands are becoming publishers and are becoming media outlets because they have proprietary data. They have the ability to spin it up and to get it out there. And because of who they are, they get lots of press behind it. That's a very hard thing to fight. But at the same time, regardless of who you are, we've all seen this. It's been called like the alligator pattern, where your impressions are going up, but you see your clicks are going down. And I would say you take a step back, and it goes back to a 3-letter acronym. Us marketers, we love these 3-letter acronyms. KYC, right? Know your customer. I don't care what the other 8 billion people in the world are doing. What I care about is that one customer that I want to read this, to be able to associate our brand with what they are struggling with, the problem they're trying to solve. So that way, when they're ready to pull the trigger, when they are ready to enter into that need state after they've done their research, they put a higher value on what our brand has given them than other brands. AI is a great enabler of that because it can take the mundane aspects of customer research and take it off your plate. It can also take data and provide summaries and help bring some of those ideas to the forefront. And here's what I'll say, right? If you have a call center or if you have a sales team and you have calls that are being recorded and you're not using AI to be able to process that and to gain nuggets, you are leaving money. You're leaving money behind. You're allowing your competitors to have parity with you, even though they should not. And that's because this is first party data. These are people, even if they don't become customers, they're telling you, I would have bought from today except X, right? And your product team is going to hopefully use that. Your product marketing team is going to use that, hopefully, when it comes to positioning. But if you're in the middle or the bottom of the funnel with your marketing activities, you want to make sure you're doing that too, because you're going to have to create collateral, right? Ad copy, creative, titles, descriptions, a landing page. Why guess when you have that kind of information at your disposal? Oh my gosh, I got completely sidetracked about what we were talking. Right. So content production, right? So as you're going through this process of knowing your customer, I think that's also something that we all have at some point separated ourselves from reality, where we think that we are for everybody. You're not. One of the things that I've learned by working at agencies is that there's tremendous value in knowing who your customer is, but also who your customer is not. If you are trying to market a Sheridan property, that is a very different audience than a St. Regis, even if they're in the same city, right? And if you're running the same ads and you're taking people to the same kind of landing page with the same kind of imagery, you're not respecting the customer, right? So once you know who the customer is, and I'm saying everything from their potential job title, what they're struggling with every single day, what those inefficiencies are that they're trying to solve, effectively their jobs to be done, then you can weave that into your content. And from that standpoint, there is no limit in terms of the topics, because every day as technology improves things, it also creates new frustration, right? So you're now trying to figure out, how do I have technology to help me do this thing better? And we live in a world where I think of Read AI, right? Which has come to the market and says, hey, we think that there's an opportunity for you to get better summaries of your conversations. You're able to better understand who's speaking and who's not, and what people think about the conversation. Like something that we all do way too much in the last 5 years. Those kind of point solutions are able to put themselves into play, even though there are so many big players out there that provide a similar product. Why? I'm sure they probably did a lot of research to understand the problem. And the way that they talk about it highlights that, right? So you want to make sure that you know your customer. You want to make sure that you're speaking to what they need, but also why they need it. And if there is a way that you can layer in your own content, your own customers that are talking about how your product provided that value, so that way you're not doing it. Like, don't believe me. By all means, don't listen to me. But this person who is actually paying for our software, listen to them, because they're more like you than we are, right? Integrating all of that together, that is how you win, right? Because a search engine is going to see it and see, wow, you have considered all the aspects of this problem. You provided a thorough answer. You have done so in a way that's like very concise and very easy to understand. I love that because my users love that. The customer, the user, they love that because I don't always need to read 5,000 words. Sometimes it's 1,500 words with a video here, infographic there, and the opportunity to read more, or for you to say, here's all you need to know. But if you want to read more, here is another piece of content for you to consider, right? Guide you down. Everybody loves that, right? If you think about these recipe websites, they probably made it horrible for everybody, except that example, but that's what they do. And that's what we're doing now, right? We try to make everything like a recipe. And then when you publish it, you have to think about distribution, right? Your website might be the last place you publish something. It might make sense for you to post it on your LinkedIn first, get that buzz going. And then once it's heavy on LinkedIn, then bring it over to your YouTube channel, because now people are starting the conversation. Let's bring the conversation over, because you know where the conversation happens? In the comments, right? So you're hopefully driving that interaction. And if you have a TikTok account, an Instagram account, you're hopefully providing a very brief summary of that content as a short, as a reel. And then on your website, you're finding ways to make sure it's merchandised. Because again, if you post something today, the likelihood that's going to gain instantaneous traction is possible, but unlikely, right? So that rush to always hit publish, there's a benefit to it, but you really have to consider, what am I doing it for, right? Is this a product release? So the second people open up their product, they're going to see this change. That content you absolutely might need on your website, like as soon as possible. And then you have videos and explainers and things like that after the fact. But other content, it's one of those things where, because we've been using the internet the same way for 20 going on 30 years, we do these things in a almost ritualistic way that doesn't always honor the way that people consume media, right? If you have a younger audience, there's a good chance that posting that on TikTok has a better likelihood of them seeing it than putting it on your website. Who goes to your website, right? Your website is usually that point of, it's like that point of final ascent, or final descent. Once they've decided everything else, they're not typically tuning into your website because they can look at what other people have had to say. Maybe there is a Reddit channel. Maybe there's a subreddit where people are having conversations and you feel brave enough to put somebody there from your brand to not necessarily insert yourself there, but to provide some actual answers. Because in your category, people have lots of questions, but they're all trying to figure it out on their own. There's so many ways of approaching this content thing. And I think because we have all thought of content as written words that exist on this owned and operated website, that so many of us are tied to it exclusively. But when you see the brands that are doing really well, they have found a way to be truly multimodal. They are platform agnostic. They are medium agnostic. The thing that they are not agnostic about, that they have very strong opinions about, is serving their user, right? And once you know your customer, that's how you're able to outmaneuver a lot of your competition, because they're following the traditional playbook and they're doing it the traditional way. And you know what? They're also probably getting traditional results.
You made so many great points just answering that last question, and we're running out of time. We want to hit you with a few rapid fire questions, but a few just jumped out at me that I don't know that what I love the idea of you should be recording all conversations that come into your company. If you've got that ability to record calls and get transcriptions, you should be mining that information for content development. We've made a similar recommendation on reviews. You mine all the content from and you create FAQs for your page. You come up with new scripts for your call center. We've made that recommendation before. I don't know that we've ever made the recommendation to not only record all those incoming calls, but analyze and look for new ideas for content. I really thought that one was great, Luigi. Thank you. If you have a few minutes more, we'll just do a few rapid fire questions as we wrap up the session. We're going a little over. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What is the best SEO or SEM tool you can't live without?
These days, so I'll say that I find myself living in SEMrush. We have access to lots of tools, but they have spent a lot of time innovating within their platform. And like 1A is actually a lot of the dashboards and tools that we built internally, but people don't have access to those. So that answer doesn't really help everybody. But, I've used lots of them. And I'll say that another one has also been Screaming Frog, just because they've been adding a lot of integrations, allowing you to allow AI to really be a co-pilot. And with those extractions, be able to do things, massage the data. And that has been also like a multiplier on the SEO side that if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I definitely didn't see that coming.
Yeah, Screaming Frog has been on fire with their releases lately. It's wild how fast they're integrating things. What's a recent campaign or maybe a tactic that you've seen and you really admire that's not something you're affiliated with?
It's not something that are you talking about like at Intuit, or are you talking about like anywhere?
Anywhere. Could be at Intuit or another totally unrelated brand.
Let's see, something really cool. I always love how bold, like when Wendy's had their run, I love that because you can't look away. Like the internet is an imaginary place with real people in it. And Wendy's has just found a way to live in the minds of so many of their competitors, but then they bring other people along for the ride, right? And it's a fast food chain. Like you don't think that there's going to be a personality there, but because they have one, you drive and you're like, yeah, let me stop on by, right? I don't know if they calculate the ROI of those interactions, but I love that because they made a decision and they stuck with it and they doubled down on it. And they've been able to show brands that it's okay to have an edge. And a lot of brands have been trying and failing, but they did it and they keep doing it. I don't see them in the headlines as much as I used to, but that run where it seemed like every single month they were roasting somebody, that always sticks out to me just because so many brands they just exist, right? There's no voice to them. But when you're able to find it and then you lean into it, you at least have an opportunity to be polarizing. And that's what marketing is, right? It's to get you to feel something. So I've always loved that.
Yeah, it's also incredible that it's such an old brand and they found a way to make them part of the conversation again. Yeah, that's a great example.
When you have that nostalgia value, you kind of get that license, right? There's something like, I feel Jack in the Box with their commercials. They try something like they're more out there, like in a Ryan Reynolds kind of way. But Wendy's, they just go for the jugular, right? If any brand is going to tell a your mama joke, it's going to be Wendy's, right?
Yeah, it's true. What's one non-marketing skill that's made you better at your job?
Curiosity. Curiosity has nothing to do with marketing. You hope that it does, but every time that I read something, every time that I see something, most times that I hear something, it's that why, right? Been doing this 20 years and still I say why to myself so much more now than I did back then. And maybe a little of that is because I know how some of these things work. So when I see how certain people choose to go to market or do things or position things a certain way, I just scratch my head and say why. And at work, that helps because we're so busy being in the business of getting our job done that when you take a pause and you ask why, you're able to do two things that I think are really cool for every single organization. One is you're able to question the norms, right? And this whole idea of we're doing it the way it's always been, who validated that's the way it's always supposed to be done. And then the second is trying like this whole idea of innovation, right? Where we were talking before about content. And now you can add tools that kind of take some of those steps and condense them down a bit. You have to be able to say, why are we doing it this way? Like, why does it take 3 weeks or 18 people or $2,000 if you account for everybody's time and energy to update one piece of content, right? What if we step back and we look at all the places where we can do something different? Where did that come from? By somebody asking why, right? But if you aren't curious, it's very hard to be an advocate for your customer, right? It's very hard to be somebody who is customer centric or customer obsessed if you're not asking why. Because your customer, they don't work for you. They don't work there. They're buying it. They're using it. So if you're there, like in the factory, seeing how it's all being made, by asking why, you're able to hopefully get people to justify some things that nobody should be doing, right? And saying, oh, you know what? We're going to take that back and reapproach this. Or everybody gets excited because we know why. We are excited about the why. And because we're so sure about it, we're going to find ways to double down because we may not have been confident, but once we actually validated it, now we can go full steam ahead.
Yeah, I love that. Curiosity is one of our brand tenets. So when we're interviewing, that's something that we're trying to dig into and find folks who want to ask that why. They want to know more about why is it done this way?
I would absolutely want to be a detective.
Yeah.
I would be at it, but that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I feel being observant and curiosity are probably two core elements of being a good detective, I would guess. All right, last one. This is maybe more of a prediction question, but we've been asking all of our guests, if you had a crystal ball and you looked ahead 12 months and you go to google.com, what do you expect that experience to be after you enter a query or maybe a prompt by that point?
Yeah, I think in 12 months on google.com, you are going to see a homepage experience that is very similar to what on chatgpt.com as well as copilot.microsoft.com, where you're given examples of all the ways that Gemini can help you, right? Search is something that it can do, but it's just one thing that it can do, right? Google has launched VO. They're always updating their Gemini platform. At some point, they're going to feel comfortable enough to bring that to the forefront and say, hey, here are some things that we suggest that you do, but also try anything, right? Google has the most to lose because they have a core business that they're disrupting on their own. So they have to walk that very gently. But when you look at what they're doing, right? Web guides, AI in food, they made it very clear that they take the threat of consumer facing AI very seriously. When you look at the homepage experience that the competitors have, that is a very stark difference. You go to google.com, it looks very much the way it's looked for almost ever, where it's a long search bar, 2 buttons underneath, and a doodle up above. I have high confidence that is going to change in the next 12 months. ChatGPT 5 is getting ready to come out. Microsoft is going to launch Copilot mode in that time. You have Perplexity with their own browser that puts AI agents at the forefront. There's no way that they can just sit back and play that relaxed posture. That's usually the posture that Apple takes, and they see what everybody does and then they go after. And now Google's taking it, where instead of being the aggressor, now because of their size in the space, they have to sit back and see kind of way people feel and go from there. I also think you're going to see a lot more multimedia, right? So there has been video added in there, but not that much in the way of images, like a little bit with feature snippets, maybe a little bit with the knowledge graph panels. I would imagine that based on the query, it's going to feel almost like we're going back 6 or 7 years, where for some searches, it was like a whole bunch of images that might be up at the top, or like carousels, just really digging deep and realizing that there are so many places you can get an answer. If we want you to trust us and to keep using us, we have to use what we know about you and show it to you in a way where you want to keep coming back. How do we do that? We know between mail, maps, docs, search, maybe you have Android. So there's a good chance that they know a great deal about you. And once they find that right balance between personalization and freaky, don't that's a little bit too much. Once they can find that blend, you're going to see that the SERP is, I don't want to say it's completely AI, but you can see they're giving a lot of real estate to AI, and then they're using the traditional SERP as a fallback. And the way that Microsoft has done this, if you guys haven't tried out Copilot mode in Edge, I recommend it because what's really cool is that you can do something and you can also say, hey, just show me standard web results, right? And I believe that with WebGuide, it does the same thing. Like it'll do like that AI mode, like query fan out and provide that kind of experience, but also it'll let you look at the regular stuff too. I think that's where it's going to go to, right? Where AI becomes front and center. It's not the entire page. It's not the entire experience, but it's the predominant portion just because it's table stakes, right? They have to check that box. There's a lot of ad potentials, right? Because Google has been trying to limit the amount of inventory, right? The right rail is gone. Brands can now show both at the top and the bottom, right? So this whole ability of scarcity in something that is virtually limitless, it's a recurring theme. So AI provides more of that. So why would they not lean into a place where they're saying, hey, within this result where people are going to engage, there's 3 spots and only 3 spots. So you now need to compete for those 3 spots. We're going to use AI to take out the low value, but we want you to provide your highest, best final price to get this new user to drive this transaction. Otherwise, you're not going to see them, right? So if they don't test something like that in 12 months, I'll be very surprised.
It's funny. The two things sort of align. The curiosity on Google's part is less about them wanting to be curious and almost being forced to be curious. Like why does search has to be 10 blue links in light of ChatGPT and all these other things that are being forced? Their curiosity hand is being forced, I guess, is the best way to talk about it.
Right. So it's like, what images on Instagram are associated with the search? What content across Quora and Reddit are associated with the search? What can I curate from an AI standpoint about this search? And here you go, right? Based on usefulness and relevance to your search, I'm going to reconfigure them because AI overviews aren't always at the top. They've actually been testing, showing them, but then people also ask, also lower down on the page. So they understand that it might not always be the most relevant thing for a user, right? So if they think that a little bit, there's no reason for them to not think that a lot, right? So I wouldn't be surprised. I just feel like when in doubt, follow the monetization. That'll always answer the question for these big platforms, right? Why is there a news feed? Why is Discover coming to desktop? Why is Threads a thing and scaling globally? Why does AI Max exist, right? It's all about monetization. Not a bad thing, right? It helps us all with our jobs to be able to reach more people in these places, to have experiences that resonate with them. But in the end, whatever experience fulfills the user's query, but also allows them to drive a higher revenue per search, because searches are coming down on Google, right? Some of that is on purpose and some of that is happening because people are searching on Bing and Reddit and TikTok and ChatGPT and everywhere else. So for their standpoint, it's always going to be about fewer, better clicks. And whatever they can do that brings the advertiser along for the ride and the user can feel good about in the end, that's ultimately what we're all going to be looking at when we go to google.com.
Awesome. I think that's a perfect spot to wrap things up. Before we let you go, please let the audience know where they can find you.
Honestly, at this point, the only place I am is on LinkedIn. I think I'm pretty sure I'm the only Luigi Ferguson out there. But if you do a search, hopefully you see me. And if you do, feel free to check out any of my content. And if you agree, if you disagree, I love the commentary because that's how all of us get better. That's how, as a marketplace, we get smarter. Don't be shy because I reply.
Love it. Luigi Ferguson, everyone. Thanks again for joining us on the Page 2 podcast. And if you enjoyed the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.